Hello, Morida. Thank you very much, firstly, to the Church in Wales for organising this and for inviting us, Friends of the River Wye, to come and talk about the data that we are collecting in the River Wye. So I guess we can look at this as a bit of a case study. We're here to talk about Welsh rivers. We are very fortunate in the Wye that we have a lot of data. You've heard about some of the data that we have in terms of modelling, understanding the inputs and outputs of phosphate and into the catchment, about some of the causes for that, some of the we have much better data now about where that phosphate is coming from and why we have such a huge surplus every year and a real failure to reduce that so that we can start to actually not only get to the point where we are no longer releasing excess into the water, but start to reduce what's already buffered in the land and is releasing into the water in an ongoing fashion. So it really is a multifactorial problem. I pause briefly. So as a friend of the River Wye, we tend to bring the Wye with us. So we have here our pot of Wye water, collected yesterday during my sample, which I do where I come from near Hay-on-Wye. Excuse me. And I'm very excited about the fact that I also got to pick up this morning a sample. This is a very tiny part of that sample of 102 different river waters from the UK, which joined the march organised by River Action on Sunday, and 15,000 people marched in London about the issues of clean water. So that's I'm going to put that here as well to sort of, if anyone wants to have a look and talk about that, please do grab me. Or James, who's here from River Action. So we are here as described because there was this pulling in of the Environment Agency and NRW in terms of the amount of sampling being done. And so back in 2020, sitting by the river, a group of us decided we need to do something about this. And so since then, there's been a volunteer group which has then formed up in 2022 as a CIO, with the specific goal of having a program of volunteer river monitoring to advance the education of the public and the understanding of the importance of river quality and biodiversity, economy and social activity. So this is us. There is an army of us. There is as mentioned, more than 200 across the groups that we have in the Wye. There's more than 350 sites monitored weekly, or fortnightly by citizen scientists measuring phosphate, nitrate, and that was discussed earlier. The story. I'm pleased to hear Nigel talk about the fact that nitrate is part of the problem. And that is an emerging piece of science coming from Cardiff University around how algal blooms and algae form in the Wye. We measure electrical conductivity, which helps you understand the level of solids being suspended in the water. Temperature, which you'll obviously understand is increasingly important. Turbidity, rainfall, acidity, ammonia, and also some qualitative measures. This was all put together in a program developed by the EA, NRW, and the University of Cardiff back in 2020, and we followed that across the three groups that are currently sampling across the catchment. So why? Frankly, it's because the Wye is an SAC triple SI. It is so because it's of very specific features that are listed. I've pulled up one here, which is the ranunculus. The legend goes that you could have 15, 20 years ago, walked the Wye, literally, because you could just walk across the ranunculus. So thick was it throughout the river. It's not there now. It's almost entirely disappeared from the catchment, which is incredibly sad. It is a keystone. Part of the ecology. So you get a lot of different animal biodiversity relying on that. And unfortunately, it is unable to re-establish itself at this point. We see a lot of sliming up of the river. You see algal blooms out of season, and we're seeing increasing amounts of that. So we talked briefly before about the reasons for this. So we've already said that there is too much going in. The source apportionment for the Y, Nigel mentioned that it was 62%, I think, for us, it's 72%, and 23% from sewage works, the rest made up by small plants, etc. So it's very much, in our part of the world, unsurprisingly, given where we are, more of an agricultural problem than a water company or sewage, storm overflows, etc. Here's a version of Paul's diagram, which sort of articulates that across the different how the inputs and outputs work. I won't dwell too much on that, but again, 3,000 tonnes thereabouts of excess P per year still coming in to a already saturated catchment. So, what is the latest data telling us? The last 12 months, we've seen that 65% of our sites monitored, the 352 sites across the catchment, have read over 0.1 parts per million, where the YSAC SSSI goals are to be below that level in almost all circumstances, except at the very end of the river where there's it nudges a bit over 0.1 in terms of the tidals. But for the vast majority of the catchment, the idea is to try to keep it under 0.1, and we're failing in the vast majority of sites. The story with nitrate is a little more complex because there's no official government targets here. So we use what the freshwater habitats call as a high pollution threshold, which is 1 part per million. 81% of our sites are in that scenario. So it's it is a story which doesn't seem to be, which obviously doesn't get the same attention, but is just as important. We are finding out more about how nitrate and phosphate are both part of the nutrient balance in the river that need to be monitored and controlled. And this is where we start to see the impact of climate change, is our turbidity numbers. So we've been measuring very consistently for 4 years now. And what we're seeing is that for 3 years, we saw turbidity, barring a few spikes, we saw turbidity stay on average, these are monthly averages, within the sort of 10 to 20 NTU, which is kind of the standard unit for turbidity. The last 12 months, which has been quite extreme in terms of weather, but we know where that's going, has seen us leap. And these are 12-month averages, so it's as controlled for seasonality, leap above 25, and that's a really serious level. So, and that's again 12-month averages. We're seeing the river really, really get hammered by the fact that we're seeing more water in the catchment, meaning more runoff from various sources coming into the water. So that's troubling. We don't just measure water quality, by the way, we also observe wildlife and other observations. So this is the ranunculus. As you can see, it's kind of, there are a few places where it has been established, and you get these circle size being the number of counts. But where you would have seen the whole River Wye and many of its tributaries going green a few years back, we now see this very sparse kind of population of ranunculus. We'll continue to monitor that. We hope that this will turn very green over the next few years if we possibly can get there. This is algal blooms. So we are constantly at the riverside, so when there is algal blooms, we see them. And again, we've got a heat map here of where we're seeing algal blooms, and that can be spatially and also temporally assessed, so you can find out when and where that's happening. We're not just citizen science, we also seek to try to do something about it. So we have put together this manifesto. I'm not going to get you to try to read that, but the key points are, because we don't just want to highlight the problems, we also want to highlight solutions and try to help provide a path forward. So our call before the elections, which was supported by all of the River Wye MPs, was to establish a single cross-border approach to tackling the pollution crisis in the Wye catchment. Cross-border is obviously critical. We can't do anything without both sides of the border being consistent. We can't have people on one side having a different set of standards applied to the other. We want this to develop and implement a water protection zone, because we believe this is the only legal mechanism which can actually put us on the right footing to recovery, to bring that surplus down and then start to eat into that the overshoot that we have. Establish a Wye recovery fund to resource a fair and fast transition to river-friendly farming. So It's not any individual's fault that we got into this mess. It's a collective failure, and so we need to support the return to practices which are going to allow the river to return to health. And that means financial support for river-friendly farming and nature-based solutions. We believe they are the most impactful and the quickest things we can do. Strengthen regulations and resource agencies to enforce against pollution when it happens and to feed into that fund with the polluter pays principle. And finally, we are not an island. As a catchment, we need to make sure that if we do all of these things to improve things, then our local community, our farming community, is fully supported, both in terms of being able to transition, but also in the long term, in terms of the value of what they're doing being priced into their goods. And that means that we cannot have something coming in from another county because then being able to sell it cheaper because they're not under the same constraints. So we need to have a countrywide, a national approach to how this gets done. And we need to have that at the border as well. So you cannot have things coming in from overseas which are just kicking the problems somewhere else. And that includes the impact of feed, stock, as well as manure, etc., running into water. So it is complex. This is not something we can simply wave a wand and fix, but we believe if we do these things, and if everybody gets behind these things, we think we can get to a point where it's a problem we can solve. So thank you, Diolch. Apologies to our Welsh. You might have caught I'm Australian, not even New South Welsh, I'm afraid. But yes, thank you again, and thank you again for organising, and look forward to the next day and a half or so of talking with everybody.